Yes, it is the fourth. That was what I was going to say. Welcome, everybody. This is the fourth lecture in a series of lectures co-sponsored by Lycoming Law Association and the Tabor Museum, where you are today. This is for purposes of celebrating the law and justice in the Lycoming County exhibit that is displayed on the walls here. Earlier this week, Justice Todd and Judges Lazarus and Ledbetter explained the role of the judiciary and the judges in the cases, and mentioned that their role is to interpret the law and to enforce the law, and that they're limited, they don't make the law. Today, we're going to hear from somebody who is on the other side of that equation. He's involved intimately with making the law. He is a member of the General Assembly, the Senate of Pennsylvania, and has been a member of that body since 2009. Recently re-elected for another 4-year term. Gene Yaw has been our senator for an extended period of time, and he is also a lawyer and a member of the Lycoming County Bar, and has been for almost 52 years. So, as a lawyer and an experienced person in the bar, and he has been in Harrisburg for quite a number of years. So, as you can imagine, he has achieved a considerable level of influence, particularly in certain areas of policy making in Harrisburg. If you will read the local papers, you will often see his name associated with he's in the thick of discussions relating to policy concerning Pennsylvania's role as an energy producer, because he serves as the chair of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee in the Senate. He also serves as the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and the Judiciary Committee has a great deal of influence in legislation involving the courts and the judiciary and lawyers, and I believe is the first level of review for judicial appointments for judges and judicial officers. So with a bird's eye view of Harrisburg, I'm sure that Senator Yaw will have some interesting comments for us today. Senator Yaw.
Thank you all, and thanks for coming. I will try to do what Gary said and give you some idea of like how things really happen. You know, for those of you who remember anything from school or high school or whenever, junior high, and they don't teach us anymore, but the crowd here, you probably remember, you know, they told you how bills are enacted and all that stuff. Okay. Right, I'll tell you the rest of the story. The comment, or the general theme of this whole series, is the role of lawyers and judges that made it work. Well, I had a little issue about the made it work. It sounds like, look, I'm still here, or I'm still doing something. So I think that when Cliff told me this, that in that whole thing, it should have been the lawyers and judges that make it work. So I'll try to give you, as I said, some idea of what I do and what the background is and how things really happen. One of the things that Cliff asked me to do was to mention a little bit about Henry Hager. One of the interesting things about Henry Hager was the attorney, legislator, member of the Senate from Lycoming County, and I think he took office in 1973, and he served from 1973 to 1984. He became the majority leader and eventually the president pro tem of the Senate. That's the interesting part. When I first came to town, I clerked for Judge Greavy, and back at that time period, and I always wondered, who was this guy that just popped into the judge's office at any time, and the judge always talked to him. So later I figured out who it was, and that Henry Hager, in his positions in Harrisburg, it was very, very important. One of the other things, though, that I will tell you as part of the rest of this story is remember I said he was in the Senate from 1973 to 1984. In 1984, he resigned from the Senate to take a job as the CEO of the Pennsylvania Insurance Federation. And rumor has it, at that time, that job paid $250,000. Now, just think about this, you know, that was in 1984, and so locally, among local politicians and things like that, it was like, well, I'm not sure that was the best for this area, because Henry never came back to Lycoming County. He moved to Philadelphia and then eventually moved to Florida. I had for many years I served with the person that took his place, a guy by the name of Sam Marshall. Sam Marshall looked at Senator Hager as being his second father. And so it all fit in with this idea of the Insurance Federation. One of the other things that Cliff asked me to do is talk about the Judiciary Committee. I am a member, I have been a member of the Judiciary Committee. Quite honestly, about 10 years ago, I was offered, it wasn't offered, I actually had to fight not to take chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee because, as Gary said, I'm the chair of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. That's my type of thing. It's outdoors, has machinery involved, it's all kind of planning, and it is not, I think I look at the Judiciary Committee as being a more studious type requirement, and that's not me. So I had to fight not to take it, and I agreed eventually to be the vice chair of the committee. The Judiciary Committee is important, but one of the things, the primary focus of the Judiciary Committee is the Crimes Code. Now, I don't think that most of the people here are involved, maybe Judge Arbuckle was, involved with the Crimes Code. We do, the Judiciary Committee is important, though, in the selection of judges, but it's probably not any more important, actually, than any of the other committees. We have 24 committees in the Senate. The Judiciary Committee is one of them. It just so happens that judges, their first hearing, if it's an appointment, goes through the Judiciary Committee. Similarly, though, like for example, we have a hearing coming up for the Secretary of DEP. That person comes to my committee, and that's the way it works. You have a hearing before that, and you vote them out, either with a recommendation for approval by the full Senate, or no recommendation, or a negative recommendation. But the Judiciary Committee has been important to this area. I think 2 years ago, the legislature changed Megan's Law. One of the changes that we made to it, we actually forgot to include a particular type of crime as subject to the mandatory reporting for Megan's Law. Actually, what happened is one of the law clerks here in Lycoming County brought it to my attention, and as a result of that, I, along with Senator Baker, who chairs the the Judiciary Committee, we actually amended Megan's Law to put this provision in that had been left out of the prior law. So that's just an example of being at the right place, having the right connections, the right people called me, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. We'll change it right away, and we did. I'll tell you a little bit about my committee, so you have some idea of what I do. I'm on the Ag and Rural Affairs Committee. I've been on that committee ever since I've been in the legislature. That's obviously, if you like to eat, that's a very important committee. There's no question about that. Every year we have Liz Volman is one of the people that work for me here in Williamsport. She's put together, we have these ag breakfasts. I guess I can invite all of you to come to our ag breakfast. They're free. The topics we talk about, anything to do with farming. In the last, for the last year, we have had, they've been sold out, so to speak. We've had to cut off attendance for them coming. But it's amazing, some of the issues that we've talked about for rural or ag operations, the one that keeps surfacing all the time, and it was a total surprise to me, is mental health. Farmers' mental health. And if you stop and think about how important that is, you know, if you are a farmer, your equipment costs are going up, you don't know whether it's going to rain or what it's going to be today. You're going to put seeds in the ground, you're going to hope that they grow, but that depends on whether it rains or doesn't rain or whatever happens, and you hope your machinery doesn't break down, and the price of fuel goes up. I mean, it's pretty understandable if you have a lifestyle like that, why mental health is so important to farmers. I'm also into banking and insurance, which is pretty self-explanatory. I'm on community and recreation development, energy and environmental resources. I'll talk a little bit more about some of those things in a minute. And I'm on the judiciary. I'm also on rules and executive nominations committee. That is an important committee because every recommendation, for example, if the judiciary committee recommends somebody for appointment as a judge, it comes through the rules and executive nominations committee. Actually, the way it really works is when somebody is recommended out of a committee, supposedly the appointment really comes from the governor. What happens behind the scenes is we prepare a list of the people that we want to have appointed. The governor has his list. We send our list to him, and he sends both lists back if we've agreed on them. And then they come to the Rules and Executive Nominations Committee, and we vote them out for confirmation by the full Senate. That's kind of, you know, a little bit behind the scenes as to the way it works. In Harrisburg, committee chairs, I said there's 24 committees. The committee chair of each one of the committees is all powerful. I'll be very blunt about it. If there's a bill in my committee that's assigned to my committee because it relates to energy or the environment or anything dealing with those subjects, if I don't want to run the bill, I don't have to run it. The flip side is, you know, that benefits me. The flip side of it is, which I'll explain when I get to talk about the House, is the same thing applies in the House. And you don't have to give a reason for it. My position, I think, for this area is very important. And the reason it's important is because I have the opportunity to influence who gets appointed to what boards that serve all of us. I have a person in Lewisburg who I had appointed to the Fish and Boat Commission. That's, you know, obviously boating, fishing, hunting also. I have a person from Lycoming County, it's on the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I have a person from Bradford County who is on the Milk Marketing Board. A person from Bradford County who is also on the State Conservation Commission. Those are really important positions that we have representation on. Like, for example, the Milk Marketing Board, there's only 3 members in that board, and we have one of them from my district. I was going to start off, and we get visited by a lot of student groups, and I go out and talk to a lot of student groups. It's shocking as to how little people know about their government. You know, I was going to start off and ask you how many senators there are and how many House members in Pennsylvania, but I won't. There's 50 senators, so there's 49 other people that have the same position I have. Each senator, we represent about 250,000 people. My Senate district happens to be 5 counties. It's all of Union County, Lycoming County, Sullivan County, Bradford, and Tioga County. The reason it's so big is because that's the area it takes for us out here in the hills to collect 250,000 people. That is a challenge because it's 4,380 square miles. That's almost exactly the same size as the Chesapeake Bay. Anybody been on the Chesapeake Bay, you know how big it is. That's my district. When I was talking about Henry Hager, I forgot to mention one thing. Henry Hager was a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. And since we're talking, the whole focus of this series is lawyers and judges. In the past 75 years, there have been 2 lawyers represent the 23rd Senatorial District. That's pretty, you know, minor, actually, when you stop and think about it. Henry Hager and myself. The other thing that I will tell you, for any young lawyers around here, there were more of them around, in the people waiting in the wings who have an interest in the position that I hold, there are no lawyers. So the likelihood, when I leave office, that's an unknown. When I leave office, the chance of somebody coming in and serving an extended period of time who is not a lawyer is pretty high. So I just mentioned that to anybody if they're interested in a career change somewhere along the line. So I wanted to just mention that. Go back to the appointments. And I don't know, I don't remember all the appointments I have. I remember Judge Byrne, we had her appointed in Bradford County. We had Judge Tira was appointed here. He was elected, but then there was nobody, so we appointed him earlier. And Judge Carlucci went through the appointment process initially. I'm sure there were other ones out there, district magistrates I know, which I just don't recall. There were a number of them. All right. Energy and Environmental Resources, I chair that committee. In my opinion, right now, the #1 issue facing Pennsylvania and the United States is grid reliability. How do we keep the lights on? And it is a serious issue. We have come very, very close in the past couple of years to the light or the grid failing. Pennsylvania happens to be part of what's called the RTO, the Regional Transmission Operator. It's an entity called PJM. PJM is Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. That was the original start. It's almost 100 years old. But it is an organization, all they do, they don't own anything. All they do is they control the distribution of electricity throughout 13 states, plus the District of Columbia, and they serve about 67 million people. It's a big deal. Pennsylvania happens to be the #1 exporter of electric energy in the country. So electric generation, Pennsylvania produces about 27% of all the electric power that goes into the power grid. And you know, what's happening, I can tell you, I'll try to be very brief about it. There's 2 ways to produce electricity. thermal and non-thermal. You can have a quiz on this, so you can remember that. Thermal is any way to produce steam, so it can be it can be gas, it can be oil, it can be coal, it can be nuclear. Non-thermal is wind, solar, that type of thing. And what's happening is the thermal power is what's called dispatchable. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Doesn't matter whether the sun's shining, doesn't matter whether the wind's blowing, doesn't matter whether it's light, dark, it's there. It's ready to be called on. We've been retiring that type of power, and we have not been replacing it with something comparable. Wind and solar, they're fine, they have their place, but they're intermittent and of limited duration. If the wind's not blowing, the windmills aren't running. If the sun's not shining, the solar panels aren't producing. Now, maybe somewhere down the road, that we'll have a solution. We'll have all kind of battery storage that we can store electricity. Right now, that technology is not out there. And the projections are between now and 2030, that's 5 years. We need, and I'll describe this, we need an additional 200 gigabytes of electric power. A gigabyte is 1,000 megawatts. So we need 200,000 megawatts of additional power. And what's in the grid, or what's in the queue coming online, 22% of it is dispatchable power. All the rest of it happens to be the intermittent and of limited duration power. We have a problem. And then to compound the problem, you've heard of AI, artificial intelligence, and you've heard of data centers. And the amount of power that is required to run a data center, unbelievable. There's a facility being built in Indiana County. It's for 4,600 megawatts of electricity. That's probably enough to power about somewhere between 3 and 4 million homes. All the power is going to be used on site for a data center. It's the largest project of its kind in the country. So when I talk about energy, for me, it's something that's really, it's very important. All right, let me tell you a couple of things that I've been involved in. Some have been fun, some not so much fun, and over the time. How many of you know what the Hellbender is? Ever heard of a Hellbender? Hey, great. Hellbender is the state amphibian. I was the prime sponsor of the bill. And here's how it came about. There was a group of students came to my office, like, I don't know, it's almost 10 years ago now. And they had been to a summer course at Lycoming College called the Clean Water Institute, which had been sponsored in part by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And they came in, I mean, these kids were like junior high kids. And they came in and they said, we think you should sponsor this bill. We don't have a state amphibian. And we need a state amphibian. And here's all the stuff. We've done all the work. Here's a co-sponsorship memo. Here's a proposed bill. Here's all these things. And look, I mean, I just didn't fall off the pumpkin truck yesterday. All they were doing is looking for a sucker that would introduce this. So I did. I introduced it, and I got criticized for it. Why are you doing such frivolous things? We have a $2 billion budget problem, and you're fooling around with these things that mean nothing. Well, the first time it was introduced, we operate on two-year sessions. The first time it was introduced, passed the Senate, went over to the House. The House Majority Leader was a guy by the name of David Reed, who was from Indiana County. And he had a constituent that, no, he didn't have a constituent. He had a nephew of a former constituent that lived in North Carolina, said there's this lizard in the woods. It was named after his uncle. That should be the state amphibian. So nothing happened. The best thing that happened, though, is during the next session, guess what? David Reed did not run for re-election. So I introduced the bill again, passed the Senate, went over to the House, it passed the House. We were worried about what's the governor going to do with this thing about the hellbender. So we had this big event planned in the governor's office, or in his room where he does all of his presentations and everything. And these kids were there at the time. Now remember, they started off as junior high kids, and by this time, this is like 3 or 4 years later, they're all like juniors and seniors in high school. The governor comes out and he's wearing a Hellbender t-shirt. So I thought, yeah, okay, we got this, we're okay. So then the next thing that happens in this is like about 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago now, PennDOT picks up on this, and we now have a Hellbender license plate. I encourage you to buy them. They're very, they're a little bit, they're vanity plates. But, so these same kids that had started as junior high, went through high school, and now most of them had graduated from college, came to that ceremony. All I'm saying is this. It was something that we looked at, this is really silly, but that group of people, those kids, those young adults now, will never forget the interaction that they had. They had an idea, they went to the legislature, and they followed it through. And, we now have a state amphibian. I mean, it really is kind of, it's one of the more interesting things that I've been involved in. As I said, we now have the Hellbender license plate, which both my wife and I have one of, so anyway. I also was able to, a couple years ago, if you followed what happened in Bradford County, the DA in Bradford County was accused of accepting sexual favors in exchange for the payment of legal bills when he was an attorney. Now, this came up after he was elected as DA. He lost his license to practice as a result of what he had done as a private attorney, but he was still the DA. Now, that to me made no sense at all. We had that same situation many years ago where the Attorney General of Pennsylvania lost her license to practice, but she was still the elected Attorney General. In any event, we were successful, and this is a bill that came out, it went through the Judiciary Committee, that in order to be a district attorney in Pennsylvania, you have to have a valid license to practice law. That just seemed like that was a logical thing to do. That bill passed and it was signed by the governor. So that was a law that we generated. A year ago, you've probably heard some things about carbon and hydrogen and the hydrogen hubs and all this money that's available. I introduced the bill, and I was at an event, I think out in Pittsburgh, and somebody came up to me and they said, "Senator, you don't know what you've done." And this guy just kept telling me, you just don't understand what you've done with this carbon capture bill. And I was like really getting nervous. I gotta tell you, I was like worried, oh my God, how am I gonna correct this problem? And he said, if this passes, it will give Pennsylvania the opportunity to enter into this program. It's a $400 billion program of the federal government. I thought, oh, okay. Well, that was my idea all the time. I had no idea. But that bill it involves a lot of pipelines. Pipelines, if anybody's interested in environmental issues, pipelines are something, it's a new creation. We never had pipelines before, you know that. They just discovered them. I'm kidding. Look this up online. The first pipeline in Pennsylvania, first pipeline, not in Pennsylvania, I think maybe it was in the United States, went from near Oil City, I forget the name of the town. No, it wasn't Titusville, it's Rixon or something like that, it's an odd name. Guess where it terminated? Williamsport. First pipeline, 1879. So when people all of a sudden say, oh, these pipelines, we have to worry about them. We've had them for, a long time. So in any event, what happened with this bill is there were 40-some environmental groups opposed it. And the bill last year in budget time, it was dead. We didn't even, I wasn't even arguing it. I wasn't even, it wasn't on anybody's list or anything. And I think that next to the last day of budget season, my staff and I, we had gone out to eat dinner, and we came back on the floor. We were back on the floor in the Senate at like, I don't know, 7 o'clock or something like that. And the majority leader said, hey, I think your bill, your carbon capture bill has life. I said, what? I don't even remember what the bill said. It was, we hadn't even thought about it. And they said, yes, this is, the unions, the trade unions said, we want the carbon capture bill passed. Why? Because it's thousands of jobs, which we knew that, because of the pipelines. Within 2 hours, it passed the House Appropriations Committee, it passed the House, and it was sent to the Senate, and we concurred in the bill within 2 hours. That's the way things happen sometimes. So you thought something was dead, it came back, and the governor signed it right away. One other thing, you may not like this, that I actually played a big part in, was fireworks. The fireworks that you've seen over the 4th of July, and I'm talking about the ones that go up in the air. They're called consumer fireworks. Pennsylvania had, when I went in the Senate, Pennsylvania had this rule or law that said, okay, you have these big fireworks stores, but if you're from Pennsylvania, you can only buy novelty fireworks. Novelties are the ones like snakes and sparklers and little things. And you come in, you have to show your driver's license, and if you have an out-of-state driver's license, you go down this side where the consumer fireworks are. If you have a Pennsylvania driver's license, you go down this side where the sparklers and things like that are. Believe it or not, you've everybody's here as an adult, and you've all heard, I won't say anybody here ever had a fake ID, at the time when you were hoping to be 21, but people were getting fake IDs so that they could go to a fireworks store and get, different types of fireworks. I just thought, this makes no sense. We either get rid of the store entirely, or we say Pennsylvanians can buy this also. Why have a product that's sold in Pennsylvania that the Pennsylvanians can't buy? That made no sense to me. So we introduced a bill. That bill never got passed, but what we were able to do, which is another trick that people use, we passed code bills. There was a tax code. We inserted that language in the tax code, and it was part of the budget process, either up or down vote, and it was passed. So that's why when the 4th of July comes around, you have fireworks that now go up in the air. They're called consumer fireworks. The ones like that, that were put on down here by the river are called display, and they're only professional. So Anyway, those are some of the things that I've been involved in. I also chair an organization called the Center for Rural Pennsylvania. Over some of the things that we've been involved in, we're very, very involved with broadband, and we deal with any issue that affects rural Pennsylvania. That's our mission. We, years ago, about 10 years ago, we started having hearings about opioids, heroin, opioid problem, and fentanyl is now part of that. We had, I think, 20 hearings. I've been all over the state having the hearings. There's about 120 hours worth of presentations on my website if you want to know about opioids. That series of hearings generated 23 pieces of legislation involving opioids. It was an amazing accomplishment for the Center for Rural Pennsylvania to do that. Right now, the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, about 2 years ago, we released a population study, and it's not good news for this area because every one of my counties, assuming the status quo, if somebody finds gold in the street somewhere, it's going to change things, but assuming the status quo, every one of my counties between now and 2050 is projected to lose population. That's critical because when you think about it, I told you how big my district is. My district's going to get bigger. Not only that, but most of the grant programs are based on population. So the less people you have, the less opportunity you're going to have for a lot of these grants. We're going to lose congressional representation in Washington, so it's a big deal. So we established a population revitalization commission to study how do we get people to move to central Pennsylvania is what I'm concerned with, but rural Pennsylvania, north of Interstate 80. I talked to my colleagues and trying to have a hearing to get them to come north of Interstate 80 is a challenge. And then I tell them, well, come to Williamsport. Oh, okay, we'll come to Williamsport. And I said, well, if you come to Williamsport and you drive another hour and a half north, you're still in my district. It's like, we just walk across the street, and that's our district. Well, that's not rural Pennsylvania. So it is different. Some of the other things that we have talked about that I'm involved in right now is the Chesapeake Bay Commission. I got appointed to the Chesapeake Bay Commission, I think 12 years ago. I am the person that's the farthest north that's ever been appointed, and on the Chesapeake Bay Commission, I chair the Pennsylvania delegation right now. I will be the chairman of the commission next year. The Chesapeake Bay Commission is mainly 3 states. It's Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. Pennsylvania produces about 50% of the fresh water that goes into the Chesapeake Bay. Covers, in Pennsylvania, it drains 43 of our 67 counties. So it's a big deal, the water that we send south. My approach has been to, we've done a lot of work in the past 4 or 5 years. We have done more work in cleaning up our water. I think it has been done in the past 20 or 30 years. And we have gone from a few years ago, Maryland sued EPA because trying to get EPA to be tougher in enforcing the rules against Pennsylvania. We have done what I would say a complete turnaround. Recently there was an editorial in the Baltimore Sun, which has been on our case for years, saying that Pennsylvania has become a leader in environmental issues. And all we've done is what we've tried to do is tell farmers and the primary source of a lot of the pollution and people that own land along a river or any waterway, just take care of your own area, take care of your own water. It's a benefit to you, and then we don't have to worry about what happens downstream. Because I don't blame people in Upper Bradford County or Tioga County. They're not gonna go to the Chesapeake Bay. They don't even know where the Chesapeake Bay is. If they wanna go to water, where are they gonna go? They're gonna go to the Finger Lakes or the Great Lakes. And I don't blame them for doing that. That's what I would do. It's where we go. We don't go to the Chesapeake Bay. But that's been a major thing that we have accomplished. Some other things, and I'll just throw these out. I introduced a bill to establish an independent energy office, because energy is so important. You heard me talk about electricity and some of the things we're doing with the gas industry. We, years ago, established an independent physical office, and we think that since energy is so important, we need somebody who's independent that tells us about what energy is, what policies are good for Pennsylvania. We have, one of my fun ones is the DEP. I have a bill to change the name. The Department of Environmental Protection. How many people want to see them come on your property? Not many. And I said, you know, you need to change the attitude. So I have a bill that proposes to change it to the Department of Environmental Services. And I said, I'm not changing any of their enforcement or anything. You would think that I am like telling somebody we're gonna cut their employees by 50%. It's like, oh no, it has to be protection, because in any event. It passed, the bills I'm talking about now have all passed the Senate and they're sitting in the House. Solar bonding. You know, these big solar arrays, how many of you ever seen like 100 acres of solar panels? Yeah, what happens at the end of the useful life? You know, how many companies do you know now that where they offer you these, you have a 20-year warranty. Yeah, right, well, 20 years, and try and collect on that 20-year warranty from whoever. So what we did on a bill, we said, okay, every 5 years, there has to be a review by certified engineers of how much it would cost to decommission this and put the land back the way it was. That applies to the gas industry, it applies to the coal industry, it applies to limestone mining or everything else. We thought the same thing should apply to solar. And you have to put up a bond to guarantee that there will be money so that landowner, a farmer, does not get stuck with 100 acres of solar panels. That's over in the House. Energy choice, we have an energy choice bill that passed. Very simple. There's 23 other states in the country have this, that you should have the right to choose your own energy. I got this idea from my perspective by watching television one night, and I think it was in San Francisco, where they passed an ordinance that said no more gas hookups, no matter what kind. No gas heat, no gas stoves, no gas anything. And I thought, Pennsylvania is the #2 natural gas producer in the country. It makes us one of the largest producers in the world. That kind of is the antithesis of what we should be promoting in Pennsylvania. So we modified it and we said, we're not going to dictate anything, one way or the other. We're just leaving it up to the property owner. If you want to use propane, fine. You want to use that's fine. You want to use electricity, fine. You want to use, I don't know, geothermal, fine. I don't care. That bill, you know, once again, passed the Senate and sits in the House. We've got all kinds of stream maintenance programs that passed the Senate, sitting in the House. Now, remember I said that committee chair are all powerful. There's a lot of things that some of my bills go to the environmental committee in the House, who is chaired by a person who, how do I want to say, he thinks, yeah, any bill that I send over there is going in the trash can. So unfortunately, even though I think there's some good ones, they're probably not going to go very far. I have a bill that I co-sponsored with Senator Ward from Blair County about milk hauling exemptions from travel restrictions. Every time, I remember Governor Wolf was big on this. Every time it snowed, he closed down the interstates. No, you can't have tractor trailers on the interstates. Okay. What happens to these farms that have to haul milk? Well, oh, I know what they do. They just go tell the cows to forget it for a couple of days. Don't, we're not going to do anything. There's a big farm in Center County called Evergreen Farms. They milk 3,000 head a day. They milk directly from the cow, goes into a tanker truck, and they hit the road with it. So by following what the governor has said, you take all the trucks off of the major roads and you put them on secondary back roads. That makes no sense to me at all. So we passed this bill out of the Senate for I think 2 sessions now, and goes to the House, and so I don't know who objects to it, but it never goes anywhere. Okay, I'll give you one last thing about what's going on right now in Harrisburg. We're in budget season. We didn't pass the budget by the June the 30th, and I don't know, I don't have all the details. I'm not involved in the nitty-gritty of the budget preparation, but they're working on the numbers. But also what happens during budget season is bills get traded. So I can have a really good bill, and if it doesn't rate high enough on the trading block, it doesn't, I'll trade this bill for that Senate or that House bill. And if you want to run that House bill, then we have to run this Senate bill. The problem comes up is, remember, I didn't ask you this, there are 203 House members, there's 50 senators. That means there's, 4 times as many of them as there are of us. So that creates a problem right off the bat. Is like, well, wait a minute, we're not approving 4 times as many of your bills to get one of ours through. So that becomes a considerable issue. I've heard things that is like so simple as like, well, Yaw's already had, he's got too many of these bills already signed by a governor, so he doesn't need any more. I don't do it for that reason, but believe me, a few years ago, there was a member of the House wanted some support for a bill to name a road. And he said, I've been in the Senate or in the House for 20 years, and I never had a bill signed by the governor. Okay, well, we'll try that, but that's what it comes down to. I don't do that. I don't really care. I look at like what's in the best interest, what's in the best interest of my constituents here in my district and for the Commonwealth. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Yes?
I have a couple of questions. The first is about the CO2 pipeline, and currently I believe there's a Senator Curry, if I'm getting the name right, who's trying to defund that because the farmers are complaining the pipeline is coming through their fields and it's destroying their ability to farm their farms, grow things properly. And there have been incidents where the pipeline has exploded, and what it does is it prevents people in the immediate vicinity from breathing, and it can kill people, and there's no way to control it once it escapes from the pipeline.
Where's this?
Is it Senator Curry that's trying to defund it?
Yeah, but what state? Pennsylvania?
Yes, sir.
Where? I just don't know. I'm not familiar with it.
County.
Well, I live in Lycoming County, and this is the information that has come to me about farmers in Lycoming County. I believe it applies to farmers in your entire district.
Yeah, it would, but, you know, I'm just not familiar with any complaints about it.
Okay, well,
Liz,
can
you
we
know
send
anything about
somebody
it?
to you to educate you a little bit on the topic? Are you open to talking to somebody about it?
Sure.
Okay, and my
I
second.
will also say this, though. The easiest and safest way to transport anything, whether it's liquid or gas, is pipeline.
I know, but they have been instances where this CO2 pipeline in other areas has exploded and done what I just described.
I'm not familiar with, my staff isn't familiar with it, so
So
give
we
me
need to
whatever
bring it to you,
information.
okay.
Okay.
So, and the next thing is about nuclear energy, because I've been talking to the governing class in Lycoming County for the last 5 years about small nuclear reactors. They're available, they're inexpensive, and they can be used to attract industry. And under the American system of political economy, which I spoke to you when I first moved here, I'm not sure that you remember the conversation. That's the way to bring industry in, that's the way to bring people in, grow the population and all the things that you've been talking about.
Small
And
nuclear reactors have been talked about for years, and the technology is not out there to
It
bring
is
them
out
in.
there, it's being used, and in Idaho, I believe, it is out there, it works, and it's fairly inexpensive.
I'm just not familiar with any
And I'd love to bring
technology.
you that information too.
On the Chesapeake Bay Commission, one of the people that I deal with there, one of the members of the commission is an admiral. He was a submarine commander in a nuclear submarine. They set a record. They were underwater for 90 days. And we talked about small nuclear reactors. You know what his comment was about them? He lived with them, depended on it. He said, you cannot afford to put them out publicly because the public can't afford the money that the Navy spends to make them safe.
Well, that's why we have governments, and they direct their
Do
funds
you want to pay
towards
for it? Do you want to pay for the
industries that are
cost of
good for
electricity?
population growth, for economic development, so forth and so on. So that is the responsibility of the government, to make sure that it's affordable and that it works for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And right now, the most affordable, I'm not saying it's the answer forever, but the most affordable and the most prevalent way to produce energy right now is gas.
I hear you, I understand that, and I support that idea, but we still should be doing this other thing, in my opinion.
I agree.
Okay.
People are out there looking at battery storage too. And all of those are fine. The problem is, we need this in the next 5 years. And people are talking about, like, nuclear power. Nuclear power doesn't have any emissions once it's built. The whole issue of the carbon footprint to build it, though, is another problem. You know, I'm not sure, looking at the carbon footprint of, you know, the number of millions of cubic yards of concrete that go in, and concrete is the highest emitter of CO2 of virtually any industrial process. But the last nuclear power plant was built in Georgia. It took 22 years. And it
A
was,
small one, not a big one, little one.
I know.
Small nuclear.
how many people are, I've not faced this question yet, but I'd just like to know, how many people want a nuclear power plant in their neighborhood?
Here
Well,
you
maybe
go.
you
Here
do.
you are.
I'm not sure other people do.
If they understood it, they would want it. It's a matter of education.
It's just like the major power plants, like, for example, the one down at Berwick. We have no, in the United States, there's no central location to store nuclear waste.
This does not throw off nuclear waste. There's new technology out there. That's an old way of looking at it. And I understand a lot of people are afraid of it because they don't really understand the new technology.
I guarantee you, if you ask the people in Berwick, you know, would you mind having a nuclear waste disposal site in your area? The answer would be no.
And that is not important right now, because you're not necessarily going to be doing it with these small nuclear reactors, because there's new technology. So, I'm not a scientist, but I understand the fear based on old information. But if they're
Well, if
educated
you
to
have some
understand
new
what the new
information about
system
them,
is, that would be.
because everything I
argue
read
with you.
is,
I think Judge Carlucci wants to help me out.
if you have some new information about them,
Yes.
please give it to us.
Yes, indeed, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Senator, could I ask you two questions?
Sure.
What's the current plan for the disposal of electric car batteries?
Not good. It's the same thing with any electronics. Every time we mention about what are you gonna do with these things, and it's something that needs to be addressed, I agree. But
Because
we're
I
not,
just don't know, I'd like to, I thought about buying one, and then I thought about what's gonna happen when that battery is done.
I have the same issue. I have the same issue with solar panels.
Yeah.
Solar panels are, it's the same thing, and we're not addressing it. It's like, okay, what are we gonna do with these things? There's some bad stuff in solar panels. Yeah, I agree. I've heard, there's like 7,000 of those little batteries in a Tesla, I think.
Yeah, I have no idea, all I know is I don't know what to do. And that, to me, was an issue. My second unrelated question, you brought up the civic education and how incredibly surprising it is for those of us who had some. What would it take to get the state to reintroduce quality civic education?
Yeah, it's
And
scary.
it's not your committee,
Yeah,
but-
yeah, it is really scary to me how little students know about their government, about how it works, and it really is. I mean, it just scares me. I think the Department of Education needs to say we need, this is what we need to teach. And we're of the same, I remember, like, I had Pennsylvania civics and all kinds of things that we learned about Pennsylvania. I mean, the person who taught that, the teacher, and she had a reputation of like being really tough. But it was fun, and I remember all the things that you learned about this, but I don't know, I think that our education is really, it's gone the wrong way. We dealt with a lot of fluffy things. It's the same way. I know Jerry's wife taught for years on it. I'd love to know what she thinks about where things are going and why, everybody has a problem now. I don't remember, maybe we had problems when we were kids. I've forgotten.
Thank you.
Nobody told me I had a problem. That was it.
That was the first, that was
They should have said, you had a problem? Yes. Judge.
Senator, you mentioned that I was fortunate to go through the appointment process, and I wanted to mention in response to your observation that I ran in the elective process, was unsuccessful, then I went through the appointment process, was successful, and then I went through the elective process again and was successful. And I would like to tell you the one thing I drew from that, I'm not sure how important it is, but it was stunning to me. In the appointment process, the one in the center, I was required to complete a very comprehensive application outlining all of my experience and the kind of work I did, the kind of education I did, and a lot of the community work. I did a lot of things.
Yeah.
And then I was interviewed on all of those things by a panel appointed by the governor, because he didn't want to do the appointment unless his panel was satisfied that I had the requisite qualifications. Then, after I got by the governor's process, I went to the Senate Judiciary Committee with their reports, and I won't say I was grilled. I was politely questioned by the Senate Judiciary Committee on those same qualifications. So written application, comprehensive, fairly thorough interview by the members committee, and then another round, so to speak, by the Judiciary Committee. In the two public elections I did, one in 2019 and one in 2023, I was never asked my qualifications, ever. Nobody cared. Which I thought odd.
All I can say is maybe they assumed from reading the background that you had qualifications.
That would be a generous way to spin it. My belief is that in an elective process, it's all about
I'm sorry.
your position on things.
Yeah. I understand. Jerry.
First of all, I appreciate your service and leadership, and as the chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission, that's a really important thing. I guess I have a couple factual perspectives, and then that's a credit needs for a question. I think our Pennsylvania outdoor recreation grew 10% from 2022 to 2023. And that was 168,322 direct jobs and $8.7 million in wages and salaries that equal 2.7% of Pennsylvania employment. What is your perspective? Do you see that as a growing sector? And how does that merge, or not merge, how does that compare with whether we're growing or declining in other categories of Pennsylvania employment?
I think recreation is something that's going to grow, and Pennsylvania has to grow. Some of the things, quite frankly, that are going on in Lycoming County right now. Remember, I said our population is going to go down,
Yeah.
assuming the status quo. We don't do anything to increase it, but I'm really kind of very positive about what's happening in Lycoming County. I mean, we've got the lumberyard, the baseball fields that are going on, and we put a significant amount of state money in that project because it's going to be eligible for all kind of tourism grants. But the projections are that could bring in 250,000 people to visit Pennsylvania. Not Pennsylvania, visit Lycoming County, visit Williamsport over the year. I mean, that's a lot of restaurants, that's a lot of hotels, that's all kinds of things like that. Transportation, everything. Then, kind of the funny part is, the Sheetz Wawa war, which has gone on Maynard Street. And now Chick-fil-A, and I forget, there's gonna be a Chick-fil-A down at the old Lycoming Mall, I think.
Yeah.
We're gonna have more chicken around. But those, plus the coming of the Bass Pro, and,
Right.
talking to the people from Bass Pro, that their commentary is that every one of their stores gets an average of like 2 million visitors a year. I mean, we are going to become, and what we've tried to talk about is we're going to become a destination, which is good because people come here. Now, there's a segment of the population out there that said, we don't want any more people. Well, if you don't want any more people, you're not going to get a lot of other things, and it's going to be to your detriment because we need a consistent growth here. But those things are happening, and I think that that's going to make a huge difference. And it's great when I can be helpful to be a part of that. I mean,
something that we've worked very hard on. But I
What-
think,
what we-
I talked to the Secretary of DCED. He came into my office asking for support for a part of the governor's budget proposal that had to do with tourism.
Yeah.
And I forget what it was. Relatively speaking, small. It was like $100 million. I don't mean that I'm that jaded, but when you're talking about 40 billion, 100 million is like, okay. And I said, well, what about our lumberyard? Would we qualify, would that qualify for a tourism grant or some of this money? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm in. But that's the kind of thing I think that's gone on, and we can look forward to. That's a very positive effect.
And for example, here in Williamsport, we have 70 restaurants, 3 chocolate and ice cream shops, and 17 brew pubs.
Why don't we get one more question right here, and then we'll retire to meal.
This is a very practical question.
Okay.
You talked about all of the bills that you've introduced and so on. Who actually writes them?
We have an organization called the Legislative Reference Bureau that you give them the ideas or an outline, say, here's what I want to do, you know, this, or this. Send it to them, they'll do it. Now, I am not above, like, if Kentucky has a bill, get a copy of the Kentucky bill, and let's see how we can adapt that to ours. And then once it comes back from LRB, then we go over it, look at it, and line it out and say, no, this is not what we want to say. We want to do something different. And we'll send it back to them, rewrite it.
Okay.
But that's the way it happens.
All right, thank you very much, Senator. Everybody grab food. There's a lot of food here. Probably you could take a whole tray and be good with it too. Help yourself, please. Thank you.
Very informative. Thank you.